Remember earlier in the year when Donald Trump nuked a perfectly good border bill for his own political gain after spending months, spending years claiming we need to fix this crisis at the border? Well, once again, we see Donald Trump putting America last and putting his own political ambitions first after he claimed that he can single-handedly, unilaterally free American journalist Evan Gershkovich from a Russian prison. But Donald Trump said he won't do it unless he is elected president. He is essentially helping Vladimir Putin hold Evan Gershkovich hostage for his own political gain. Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, Evan Gershkovich, the reporter from the Wall Street Journal who is being held by Russia, will be released almost immediately after the election, but definitely before I assume office. He will be home, safe, and with his family. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, will do that for me, but not for anyone else, and we will be paying nothing. So instead of Donald Trump saying, I'll call my buddy Putin and show you how I can work with world leaders to reach an end goal that benefits America by releasing this journalist, he's essentially saying, vote for me. If you don't vote for me, I won't call Putin, and Evan Gershkovich will stay in a Russian prison. He is dangling these keys above the heads of American voters and even Evan Gershkovich's family in trying to blackmail us into voting for him. He's essentially holding Gershkovich hostage with Putin for political gain. And to drive my point home even further, Donald Trump made a post on Truth Social on the same day showing a flag that says Trump or death. Trump is basically saying, if you don't give me what I want, if you don't feed into my narcissism, then I won't do anything for you. In fact, I will leave you to rot. I will leave you to rot in a Russian prison cell. So if Donald Trump actually has the power to bring home Evan Gershkovich, as he says, and he doesn't do it for political purposes, that is evil. The Shallow State on Twitter said, take a moment to process this post by Trump. I don't usually post his posts, as you know, but this one is so stereotypically emblematic of three things: his narcissism, his sociopathy, and his desperation. Narcissism, this post is only about him. Sociopathy, to him, Gershkovich is not flesh and blood, just a pawn. Desperation, it's a flail. Sometimes narcissists have such a self-centered worldview, they assume others do too. Battered narcissists overplay their hands like insisting their lawyer call a terrible witness. Andy Kroll said, I rarely weigh in on Trump posts, but this latest one should not escape your attention. Trump seems to say here that his relationship with Putin is such that he could secure Evan Gershkovich's release, but won't do it until he wins the election. Keep that in mind. And Trevor Reed, a former U.S. Marine who was also wrongfully detained in Russia, gave his opinion by saying, as a former wrongful detainee in Russia, I would just like to remind everyone that President Trump had the ability to get myself and Paul Whelan out of Russia for years and chose not to. I would be skeptical of any claims about getting Evan Gershkovich back in a day. And it's worth mentioning that Paul Whelan, the other U.S. Marine just mentioned, spent 3 years in a Russian prison until he was released in 2022 under the Biden administration. And I want to see Evan Gershkovich come home just as much as everybody else, but I have a feeling that when Donald Trump says he can easily bring him home, that would require ceding Ukrainian land to Russia. Donald Trump would make some sort of deal, he would negotiate some sort of peace deal that benefits Russia more than it benefits us. And that is the true risk of a second Trump term. Even if we put aside all of the domestic issues like abortion, like gun reform, like education reform, like climate change, like democracy, like Project 2025, we can go down the entire list. But even if we put aside all of those domestic issues, the global implications of a second Trump term should terrify all of us. We will see our own institutions be weakened. We will see our alliances with other NATO countries weakened. Donald Trump will embolden the authoritarian urges of people like Vladimir Putin, people like Xi Jinping, people like Viktor Orban, who he praises every single day. So when Donald Trump says that him and Vladimir Putin are buddies, this should be a reason for concern. I'm going to play you a clip of my interview with former Representative Adam Kinzinger, where we talk about how pervasive Russian disinformation is in the mainstream of American politics today.
To sit there and say that Vladimir Putin is on our side or is on Trump's side, let's keep this in mind. The Russian economy, which is now pivoted to basically being a one-trick pony, a war economy that's funded by oil, it reminds us of a lot of Middle East countries. The Russian economy is the size of Italy against the United States economy, which basically exceeds that of all of Europe. if we want to align ourselves with a failing country, a declining population, with drunk men that basically all die at the age of 62 if they don't stab each other to death prior, and send people to where there's been 450,000 casualties every 5 days. There are as many Russians killed as we lost in 20 years in Afghanistan. If that is the leader in the country that you want to hold up on a pedestal, be my guest. But let me tell you, as a Christian myself, this idea that Vladimir Putin is somehow the defender of Christianity when he's prosecuting Christians in Crimea, when they left Bucha and Irpin, you see that they abused and killed priests and preachers that were there, Baptist ministers, Orthodox priests. When you see missiles indiscriminately flying into churches, there is no God I follow that would take a man like Vladimir Putin and say, you are the example of me. And unfortunately, these people have been abused for their money, they've been abused for their vote, and they've been abused for the power that every individual American can give to a politician by a terrible man, and now the lackeys that follow him, like, frankly, even Speaker Johnson and all the Republicans in Congress.
Yeah, especially Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Oh, yeah.
especially Marjorie Taylor Greene. But it really feels like a lot of this is a function of Russian propaganda seeping into the mainstream.
It
I mean,
is.
you have people like Tucker Carlson, who actually he's not on Fox News anymore, but he was spewing Russian propaganda on Fox News. Vivek Ramaswamy copying Kremlin talking points verbatim. Elon Musk owns X, and on X there's a bunch of Russian propaganda. And it really feels like Russia is waging this invisible holy war on the West through Russian propaganda. So do you think, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that I think you're absolutely right. So in 2015, I remember Dana Rohrabacher was a congressman from California, and I would debate with him on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He was a Republican, and he was pro-Putin, only pro-Putin in Congress. And people would tell me, Adam, don't engage with him. We literally think he was on the FSB payroll, by the way. And so, but 5 years later, or what, now we're 9 years later, the entire party is almost in this position. And I think it is absolutely the impact of things like Twitter. I think it's the misinformation from Twitter or from X or from whatever, Truth
TikTok.
Social, TikTok, that then leaks over to a Fox News story that then has millions of eyeballs. Or you can see the direct influence where a story comes out and it's put out by what seems like a normal website. It'll be like, the News Today or whatever. And then there's a couple of websites that pick it up, and then a mainstream media website picks it up because it's been picked up by enough. And that is directly traced to the Kremlin. And the problem is, in a free society, we're not pushing back against this. We don't have a government agency that's trying to, in essence, re-educate Americans about the truth. Because if we created something like that, Rand Paul would call it the Truth Department in 1984. So we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back and just hoping that freedom and the internet overcomes Russian propaganda. And unfortunately, it's not working.